Hello there, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing drilling on a very important spot, the big blind versus button, single raise pot, out of position pre-flop quarter. And these are going to be hands where we face a small bet on the flop and an overbet on the turn, and basically how we plan ahead to the river, towards bluff catching, towards how we play our value, how we play bluffs, just these. Earlier in the week, or a bit of last week, I spent a good 2 hours just going over turn heuristics. I did actually record myself doing it, but I looked at it and I thought there's absolutely no way in hell, even if I edited this down, anyone would want to sit there and watch me break down 2 hours of going over heuristics on how to build them. So the best thing to do is to just show the results. I have absolutely no incentive to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, mainly because I would like to get 50 more subs so I can get 1,000 subs. That's it. That's my only goal. I don't even get anything for getting 1,000 subs. I would just like it for my ego. So yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, we'll just go through it. The spot. So first of all, the thing is, I would set up the drills. So we get back into it, and how I basically built my heuristics was I would just do this, and I would just go over different board types. So like this low connected board, for example, this is not, you're not going to see this very much at all, but it actually makes a lot of sense to play this strategy because a lot of people will check massive amounts of their range, including their strong stuff in this spot. And what that does to you is, because one, I mean, sometimes you can have a leading range. This board less so because 9-6 suited is in buttons range, but just generally these like lower connected boards, people are actually going to check a lot. So when they do actually hit the betting node, and we don't check raise the flop, whereas they can actually start value betting the strong hands in this spot. Super era of pre-flop study, so I can spend so much more money per month. But yeah, it's quite cool. It's quite cool, like button users over. It's a very rare theory line, obviously, but it does make sense to like push the top of your range into this overbet node. But this is a board I would just discount, so I wouldn't even like think about having to play this. I'll just click call, why not, and then check, and then like then I'll just click. I mean, we're probably supposed to fold this, so I'll just click fold in theory, but like whatever really. We'll discount this one because it's very rarely happens in theory. So I'm going to discount the first one because it's a very rare line in theory. And yeah, and this is kind of a similar board, a board that you're gonna check a lot. As an in position player, we're gonna donk a lot. So like, well, if we actually get into this node, it's just not gonna happen very often. And yeah, we obviously just fold the turn. We're gonna get to boards like this. This is where it's gonna start happening, and this is where we built our heuristics. And I'm gonna show you what I've built. The first thing you have to understand though is like your incentives behind any line. And what our incentives mean are basically how much realistically are we going to get to bluff catch the river. How much do people bet fold, how much to, what boards, what parts of range do we want to are going to be indifferent in theory, and then we're just going to sort of look and how much do they go bet check. So the average bet check frequency is roughly 50%. So like we can assume half the time on the river they go bet check. Now they're still showing down quite a strong range, like generally, but like we probably still like if we call, we still get to win. When we put our bet in for the pot, we still get to showdown half the time, and we will still win at showdown. With a hand like this, I think somewhere in the region of about 33%, maybe at 1/3 time, 1 in 3 times maybe. So like in a way, that's already like kind of telling us when we receive these pot odds, like we're still gonna win the pot. When they check, just probably around 20% of the time. So like if we were offered the price of 20% pot odds, it would just be an auto call with any pair because we're winning the bet check line like 20% of the time. But obviously that doesn't account for improving your hand. It doesn't account for bluff catching properly. It doesn't account for other things, We'll say other things. Is there anything else to account for? Them accidentally misclicking and betting one big blind? I don't know. So what this is going to lead into is this sheet here, and this is where the magic happens. I started writing down, I have a spreadsheet which I talked about. You know, I just basically put down all the notes in each board, you know, the flop strategy, but we're going to focus entirely on the turn and our notes. But like, you have to like understand the incentives here. I put comments in on the range. It's going to be very small here, but what it essentially says is there's an incentive towards bluffing the turn versus even versus an overbet. Now you don't want to do it on every board, obviously. There's an incentive towards bluffing the turn with certain parts of your range. There is an incentive towards on most boards. There's an incentive towards bluff catching against button versus big blinds specifically. And I've made a general note here. The range is slightly stronger than it should be, because on average the pool isn't going bet enough with trash. But what that means is people, you know, they're going to be betting their like good top pairs and stuff on the time. But it doesn't mean that they're going to call them, and it also means they're going to be betting a lot of equity draws. Again, doesn't mean that you still can't exploit that, because they're probably not going to find the trashy bluffs enough of the time. And this is a common theme. Players who aren't super advanced, and they're not going to find the trashy bluffs enough. They're going to bluff too much with equity, and they're going to like go bet with top pair. Like I even talked about this myself, like against the average player in one of my early videos. Like people don't go bluff enough in like bet check bet, so we should overbet a bit more thin with top pair. That's great until you do exactly what I'm going to show you here, which is a counter to my strategy. I basically shown you my strategy, and then I'm going to show you how to counter it perfectly. To be honest, though, I probably will just be more balanced generally, because I'm super paranoid about people exploiting me. But you know, this will get forgotten about pretty quickly. The other note I'm going to make is generally the pool is going to over bluff the flush closed river like a lot. This is all like through snap MDA. We want to go into our formation, BBvBU, run. You see like there's a whole graph of like little things about sizes. Oh, if they do this, they do that. Blah, blah, blah. It's too confusing. Like, you know, the only sort of data point I can get from this is the river bet sizes that are like kind of below pot. You actually have less incentive, like certainly below like 50% and smaller. When people just go bet overbet and then they bet medium, you actually they don't bluff that much and they don't fold that much. It's almost as if they are trying to be paid with a strong hand or trying to induce you. It's really weird. It's like they do it with like specifically top set. It's a really weird thing, but like it's like almost one of the only lines where the pool is balanced too. And it's like there's very few spots you actually want to do that with. Only just like, you know, maybe like four liners, four straight turns and stuff. You know, just four straight rivers, just these sort of things. But yeah, there's some EV in calling in bluff catching. The average size is smaller than it should be in theory. So what people do is they don't go as big as they should, because people use bet 30 more than they use bet 70 or bet, you know, over bet flop strategy. So yeah, what happens is the average pot size is about 3 and a bit big blinds smaller. And yeah, you'll be surprised on the textures what you can find. I think like one of the biggest textures is going to be, there's a lot of like noise in these sort of things, but I think the sort of thing you have to kind of understand is if there's a random overbluff, is like where does it come from, you know? And I think one of the places it most likely comes from is these, like here you can see there's like, now you have to take this with a pinch of salt. It says it's slightly good bluffing one, but the pot size is smaller than it should be. On average 36% bluffs. Now sometimes they're just going to overbet the river, and they might not overbluff. So you have to take this data with a pinch of salt. But generally, what we kind of see is there is a part of the range which doesn't really get represented here, but it's going to be ace high. And you can see it's only happening 1% more on this graph here. But what this ace high obviously is in the river flush hitting is the nut flush draw, ace 10 off, whatever, like king queen 8. Let's just bring up the exact board. Okay, you're supposed to have a leading range, but like what happens in this line is when the button bets, they actually rip in their nut flush draws almost pure, like when they choose to bluff a nut flush draw. Obviously ace jack off is never even meant to be in a range. People are barreling these hands like near 100% frequency with the heart. You know, even things like ace 5 off can be like a good bluff. People don't 100% barrel them, but you see how like when they go all in, they just like how little bluffs they're supposed to have with these nut flush draws. They're also like not supposed to like reach this node very much, but like obviously the solver's picking like 125 as sort of a main size. So if we just assume it's 125, we're going to see though the same sort of thing. If we ignore the leading range for a second, like all of these like ace of hearts combos, they might be in there 100. They'll pick one overbet size and they'll put these into the range 100% of the time, like with the nut flush, and that's just going to leave way too many bluffs. Just generally. So that's why this spot, for example, is one of the most overbluffed spots that you can actually find, which allows us to bluff catch in kind of a weird way, which we're going to get into some drill. Quite simple. We have our general heuristics here. We're just going to be calling top pair as a default, except on really dynamic boards, and then our pairs plus our flush draws, open-ended straight draws, generally going to call as a default, but on the dynamic ones we're going to focus more on a pair and nutted draw, and the dynamic ones are going to be listed here. Nut flush draw plus combo draw is always going to be calling. So like obviously this is a rainbow board, but it's different. But like if you have a nut flush draw, even without a pair, you're always going to call, or a combo draw, so you have an open-ended straight draw. It's always going to be continuing. Sometimes the combo draws actually become your bluffs. It depends on the board. Sometimes your bluffs actually come from like the weakest flush draw hands. It depends on the board a lot. Like 2 Broadway low board is going to be different to ace high, like triple Broadway board. Second pair plus overcard with the flush draw blocker. This is what we were talking about. So that second pair that has the flush draw blocker is going to be continuing. And then we're going to have specific heuristics for each board. Some of these boards are going to be zero raise boards. This specific board, you can actually start raising for value with your 2 pairs and sets. However, ace king 6 5, I would actually not mind just having 0 raises on this board, but like if it's ace queen, that's a bit different because we actually have some ace queen, not a lot but some in this line. But yeah, this one maybe we play 0 raises. You just decide if you want to raise in range, and then if you are going to have a raise in range, you would raise your 2 pair, and then you'll balance it out with like weak combo draws or open-ended straight draws. So on this board, you're supposed to call some stuff like 8-7 suited low back door, for example, 8-7 of diamonds, and those are your bluffs, or like maybe a 5. Although I'm not sure if a 5 specifically would bluff here. Maybe like a... Maybe this is one of those ones you turn your second pairs into your bluffs. But yeah, our general heuristic is like we're going to be calling second pair plus good kicker on this board, and this is a second pair plus good kicker, so we're actually going to be calling it. Now I think people would like maybe not want to call because like they would bluff a lot with the queen of whatever, but the idea is we just get to the river and we have some EV in this bluff catching line. Although with the straight coming in, it might be like not a hand that we want to call, but we can actually look at the data on an ace plus Broadway board and see how overbluffed they are. Yeah, so yeah, we've got into this situation, and we can actually see there's a lot of like cool EVs, like there's like average bluffing on these kind of ace Broadway boards is actually pretty high. Now obviously it does seem scary because they have nut advantage. They can obviously shove here, and they're shoving 150%. And if we go back to our, let's just ignore the sim. If we have to call for 40% pot odds. So like if you look at something like this, and on average, it says, well, that's 36.1% bluffs, but you have to like decipher for the river sizing, and you can like play around with things a little bit, but like you can see like there are like 8.8k examples of like people shoving for like 200% or even 150%, and like they turn up with quite a lot of bluffs in these spots. Like there's quite a lot of examples of people like bluffing, they're finding the bluffs. Now, and you can see like the ones that they're surprisingly not bluffing are the really small sizes. And it's quite obvious here, if you are a somewhat like studied player, you understand in this spot, you just have an out advantage. So if you have a bluff, it's like you're very, very incentivized to shove. And yeah, queen of clubs, maybe you might think, we block queen 10, you know, queen jack. But there are other hands that people will bluff. They'll, you know, they might bluff with 5-4. They might bluff with, you know, jack 10. There are loads of offsuit combos. And also, what is his value range when he shoves? Ace king is going to be the bottom here. I don't think he's shoving ace queen. And I think kings is like supposed to sometimes check the turn. So like we have actually some value removal, as well as even though we are having bluff removal. So like if it's over bluffed, like we could probably call. I'm pretty sure this hand is like maybe just pure folding, but like from my perspective, if we have this data, we could make a call down like this and it could be profitable. Like it might be losing -3 in theoretical EV, but if they are finding 45% bluffs, you know, I mean, you don't have to call down this hand, obviously. Well, there's actually a bit less bluffs than I thought. Maybe it's not a great spot. it's coming in at roughly 35%, and then there's a bit of two pair in there, so it's like one of these other spots in theory. Yeah, maybe calling king queen is a bit extreme here. But you know, if I node lock this to 45% bluffs, or even just 40%, 42% bluffs, I think king queen is just going to pure call. And I don't think you need me to do that to believe me. Next hand. I haven't made it mention anything specifically about an ace turn, so generally what you want to do in these spots is use general heuristics. And yeah, call in top pair except on dynamic. This is a pretty-ish dynamic-ish board because it's double flush draw, but we do also have top pair. So, you know, there are loads. I think there's decent opportunities in the bet check line to win a certain percentage of the pot. Also, when you overbet, he's sort of just saying he has like good ace-x or trips. So yeah, I just see there's no reason to do anything but call here. And then we check. And then he checks back. Here's ace queen. But you know, it's a mixed call in theory. We have some EV in the bet check line. We have some bluff catching opportunities. Especially if the flush hits, you know. And moving on. So we have the low board with the flush. Now we have talked about low dry boards that are non-paired. We're generally going to be using the general heuristics. But we are going to be like having a small bluffing range in the spot too. This is a paired board, so like again, it's kind of a weird spot because most people wouldn't overbet here. But when people start overbetting, they kind of they've stopped saying that they're ever having an overpair in a spot, and they've started saying they're having like trips at the worst, or possibly just only flushes and sets, or like, you know, I don't even think a straight wants to overbet. You'd rather overbet trips because at least with trips you can make a boat if you're against a flush. With straight you're just fucked. So you know, yeah, it's kind of a weird. It's sort of a weird board that's like not really covered. But yeah, we're just going to sort of look at the general heuristics, but we're going to take into consideration the dynamic nature of the board plus his value range that he's representing, which is very important, by the way. In a lot of these heuristics, it's like completely pointless when you're actually studying the heuristics. You need to look at their value range, and go from there. Our general heuristics here, we're going to be calling top pair, except on the dynamic board. So obviously a 9 is something, we're not going to auto call a 9 based on this sort of board. But we know we don't have top pair, we have third pair, we're going to call pair plus a flush draw, we're going to call pair with a nut draw. So obviously like we have, ace 5 offsuit with a spade, ace of spades, we'd continue that. Not a flush draw plus combo draw. This hand obviously isn't. The only thing is a second pair plus overcard. This isn't really, I mean, could this count as a second pair plus? It has an overcard or a flush draw blocker. So if we had like 7, if we had 6-5 off, which probably shouldn't have in the range on this rake structure, but I play a lot of ante, so I would have it quite a lot. That would be a call. But even just something like pocket sixes with a spade, that just seems like a good call, because people are going to shove a lot with the nut flush blocker on flush turn. But yeah, going back to our actual hand, we just have a 5. It doesn't have a flush draw. It doesn't have like any real outs in the spot. Their value range is very strong. We're just going to have to pitch this hand, unfortunately. And you can see it's pure fold. By the way, he just like completely barreled off ace 3 offsuit with no spade. That's like that's that air portion of the range people don't find when they're bluffing. Yeah, so now we're on a paired board, so it's like a Broadway paired board. I have noted like ace paired plus board. I haven't talked about Broadway paired, but we kind of sort of think it's kind of a very similar to like a Broadway board, an ace paired board, right? So it's somewhat dynamic. When they start over in this spot, we haven't raised the flop. They can still value bet over pairs here, but that's the bottom of their range. They're not doing this with tens. I don't think they're supposed to anyway. So like on average, they're saying they have jacks, like a jack or better. But like it's not a terrible spot to overbet when you actually have an overpair in this line. But yeah, generally on our sort of paired boards, we're always continuing trips. We don't want to always raise the flop with trips. We want to raise it pretty often, but not always. Top pair plus flush draw. Top pair per weak kicker. When I say top pair, I'm talking about ace x. In this one, it would be like second pair. It would kind of talk about like weak pair. So we're looking at these weak pair draws. We're also like top pair plus set blocker. So basically, if we were to have 7-3 suited here, which would just fold pre on the rake structure, but in an anti-game it wouldn't, or a 2BB open, if we had 7-3, that would be a better call, because freeze would be a hand he would bet the flop with and then overbet the turn with. That's a pretty decent call. Like definitely a hand like just a random ace 3 of spades or hearts would certainly get in there too. These sort of hands make pretty good calls on these kind of boards. Now when it comes to the second pair, on ace x paired specifically, they're very bad bluff catch incentives. But now on the Broadway paired, let's just go through and have a look, because I think this makes a difference to what we bluff. So we're looking at like this. So this king to 10 paired one, it's not as bad as the ace paired, but the bluff catch incentives are way less. The bet fold frequency is way less. So we're kind of looking at a spot where there's way less bluff catch incentives, but there is still some if the river comes with a flush. Let's just stick a 4 in, for example. Even though it's paired, the flush river though, more bluffs are possible, and there's more betting going on. So again, this nut flush draw. So like having specifically the 7 of diamonds isn't like a terrible. These boards we actually don't play many razor ranges. Much of a razor range. If we did, although I do think on these like Broadway plus paired ones we would play a bit more razors with like our like actual sets and stuff, but if we did play a raising range, I wonder if this would be a bluff raising candidate. It probably wouldn't, because generally we would want to bluff with a hand like you know, 7x of diamonds or something. However, I do think this one like has some EV in like raising. I would just fold this generally. I think there's very poor bluff catching opportunities. The flush coming makes it a little bit better, but how relevant is the 7 of diamonds in blocking flushes? You have to think about this. And we would rather have 7, 8. We'd rather have the 6 of diamonds, to be honest, because then at least we block a 6 of diamonds. Because we're talking about like these weak pairs, these second pair bluff catchers. We want them to have blockers to flushes, so like ace 6 of diamonds, king 6 of diamonds, etc. But we want them to have. We also want them to have unblockers to like the nut flush draw or like the second nut flush draw. You know, those are hands that bluff often. So I do. There's possibly a little bit of EV if you feel really spicy in like raising this hand or calling this hand, and then if they bet the river but they don't shove, you can turn your hand into a bluff. There's possibly some EV in that. It's a very crazy line. I don't think I would take it personally. And yeah, you can see it's indifferent. You can actually see there's a tiny amount of raise with this hand, but like 1%. So again, if we're thinking that they overfold when they bet fold, possibly some EV. Calling again, that bet check line. And that also that river EV when we get to bluff the river, because like you got to remember some hands make their EV up in theory from actually taking bluffing spots. So like if this hand ever has a bluffing spot on the river, it might be, would it be something like if we hit a 6 of diamonds, and they obviously they're supposed to shove, but like imagine the pool just goes like, I don't know, 60, like a pussy, and we just have this hand as a bluff. Like here, we can just shove it as a bluff. And like if that happens more in theory, like, and we go all in and they're just like, no, oh fuck. Even if they say in reality that they have like more hands than this, in reality they have like nut flush, or, you know, they use the size of all of their bluffs, or like they always just put weak flushes into this line, so it's not balanced, and then they just start folding like way more. Because like bet fold on the river, when they go bet and non all in, there's actually decent, you can actually bluff that spot, but you kind of want to have a good combo like this to do it with. So that's where some of the EV comes from in calling the turn with this hand. If you're never prepared to play a bluff on the river, and there's very little incentive to bluff catch, and you're not winning enough in bet check, then you should really just start folding the turn. That's sort of my assessment of how you should approach it. Okay, so this is a 4 straight. This is a really dynamic board. This is one I didn't really cover because now we could count it as like 2 pairs plus straight, but I think the important thing to realize about this spot is his value range is a 10, and he will actually put sets into this line sometimes because he wants to have nutted hands on paired boards. If he doesn't put sets into this line, when the board pairs, you can actually just like donk shove like your range probably as a bluff, depending on like if they actually defend 10x or not. And the other thing is they would also like get value still from draws, like nut flush draws, for example. So this is just super dynamic. So when we says our general heuristic is called top pair except dynamic, well, this is a very dynamic board. So we're not auto calling top pair. We want a pair with a good draw. So we want a pair with a flush draw kind of thing. And we might even turn 8x or 9x of spades into a bluff or something. So yeah, I would just pitch this. Obviously, the only thing is if a 10 comes, we can make the nut straight, but it's not. It's not even going to be the nut straight, is it? Because king queen. So like, you know, we're just going to fold, unless he never has king queen in his range. So I just don't see any reason to like continue here. It's also going to be very bad bluff catching spot, these 4 card straight turns. You can see you had the flush draw this time, but it's even more reason to fold with the queen of spades, I guess. So now we have this one Broadway board. It's kind of low paired. We can sort of just this does make like, obviously this will devalue a 7 a bit more, because like something like if you just had a7 here, well, I'd say a7 is about as but if you just, what 7s would you call the flop with on this low dry board? Not a huge amount, maybe. I guess a7 would be like one of your main ones. Maybe you probably don't do it, but maybe you just say for some reason you called queen 7 of hearts on the flop. If you went 25%, I think you could definitely continue queen 7 of hearts. That's going to have less incentive, because if we hit the queen, we're going to be doing much worse, because his top pair region, which by the way is the worst hand he would value bet, would be like a good king. His top pair region would still beat us, so we just have less outs. We'd rather just like call pocket pair here, because we want to well, if we do hit our set, we can just like go for it all basically, especially if he has trips, which is another hand in his range he would rep it. But although his trips are really just like, you know, king deuce, which the pool would like often check, and then just like ace deuce. So yeah, I mean ace deuce would be like kind of his main trips, and that would he'd still have like queen deuce and maybe some jack. I think in this situation he probably wouldn't have jack deuce, but you know, queen deuce for sure. So that's kind of like that, and also he's gonna have pocket 7s, aces, ace king, these kind of hands are going to be in the overbet range. So like having a turn 7, ace 7 is really good here. Having a good medium sized pocket pair, 8s and 9s would be good to call. Having a king is obviously good. So this is a solid board with a kind of auto call in top pair, and we really want to have any 7x we arrive with, we kind of want to call pretty often anyway. And then yeah, where we're indifferent is with a hand like 4s here. So our general heuristic, we have some talk about like having Broadway hands, Broadway when there's a straight, Broadway when there's a flush, but not Broadway when there's a brick. If it's a brickish one, we're just going to refer to our normal heuristics. Having a, you know, we've got our normal pairs and stuff, second pair plus overcard. So you know, we're looking at something like pocket 8s or 9s that we would sometimes have here, or flush draw block, and then yeah, like a hand like 4s or 6s or 5s. These hands are just going to be like indifferent realistically, and mix and fold. So realistically, how often are we going to get to bluff catch the river in a line like this? We don't want to have too many weak pairs in our calling range. It is like and paired Broadway plus paired boards we saw before weren't as bluffed as other boards. So yeah, we would just hit the fold with this. But I kind of have an idea of where my calling range is at, which is, you can see it is indifferent, but my calling range is at 7x, the king x, the pocket 8s, the pocket 9s, these kind of hands. Obviously the slow play trips. There's probably some EV in like calling ace high too, but you know, it's quite interesting. If you just mix fold those hands, you're probably not doing terrible in that spot. Onto like a different one. Now this is ace high board. We've talked about a few ones like ace high, ace Broadway, but generally just an ace high board. We're going to refer a low one. We're going to refer to the general heuristics. So you know, this is obviously going to be a pair with a flush draw. It's not super dynamic, so we don't really need to like only call nutted draws. Yeah, so what we can do is we could look at a no showdown combo draw and possibly turn it into a bluff. Do we need to do it on this board? Obviously our hand is going to have like, against his value we have no showdown, obviously, but it's not super dynamic board. And so we actually have a hand that I think could possibly just only call. there's possibly some EV, and I've turned this into a bluff. I would rather say you would want to bluff something like a 5-4 or a 6-5, but so I'll just hit the call. But I do think there is some EV and sometimes raising this hand. And yeah, we just get to the river now. We have a flush. It's beautiful for us. Obviously, they would bluff a lot with like the, you know, king 10 off with a spade. So like maybe not quite as good, but like they're still gonna have like. I think there's less potential like opportunity that he will like bluff specifically the king of spades, because like the king of spades is no longer in his range. However, there's no reason why somebody wouldn't like still fire no showdown here, like 8-7 of diamonds or something. Or we have to hope for. But also here's the second thing: they also are going to bet. You know, they are going to bet weaker flushes as well. So yeah, we have an obvious call. Even the solver even shoved the river with a set with a spade on a flush draw board, which this actually makes a lot of sense because the king of spades being there, like we're probably not calling queen of spades automatically. So we're going to be calling like lots of like just combo draws basically. So it's our pair plus draws will have the spade in. So it's actually a very logical bluff in my opinion, or value bet from him. And people are going to bluff catch with 2-pair. I wonder if the pool just finds this shove in this spot. Like it just like to me it just seems like it's a shove that you have to like really think about to find, based on the BB call range. And we were just really interested in like our threshold. Yeah, so like obviously we see Jack 5. There's tiny amounts of raises, but like more of the raises would come from this. Actually, so this is like also we talked about that weak pair with a straight draw being a potential bluff. Like we can actually see it happening here with like 5-4 of diamonds, 5 deuce, etc. And like we talked about that second pair being a potential bluff, so you can see it. This being the turn set blocker as well, so we can see it with like a tiny amount of like 9-6, but like 9-7 of hearts, for example, which is a low back door, which doesn't often feature in your calling range. But yeah, that's some EV and like calling it, and then you turn it into a bluff in that line. But like pure raise with 9-8 combo draw. I think this is like quite cool, like doing it with these turned weak pair, even if it's a second pair, which is something I did note in the heuristics, but I don't think I spoke about. Yeah, but when you do raise, you really build it around 9s, and you really build it around your slow plates flop sets, like any sort of like 2-pair, like 9-5 for example, turn 2-pair, or do you slow play 5-3. So like not every 2-pair is running. You just seem to be like, when you do actually have the raising range, you do mostly, it very rarely happens, but you do mostly build it around your sets. Oh yeah, you also very rarely have 4 deuce slow play the flop too, and then you find like bluffs from like certain combo draws, but you're not supposed to do it very often in theory. But if people are overfolding the turn, you can probably push that equity a little bit more. Oh, and the other thing was, what is our threshold with our hands? You can see queen 8, queen 7. These hands start to become indifferent. You see queen 10 actually is like almost always folding, but there's a tiny amount of raise of it in theory. I'm guessing this just gives you like some bluffing opportunities on like certain runouts, as well as like, you know, when you maybe on specific runouts it gives you bluffing opportunities. But this is one of those spots where like auto folding queen x of spades is probably not bad here without the draw. Like we obviously queen deuce is a combo draw, queen 4 is a combo draw, but like queen 6, queen 7, queen 8. So these don't really feature into the range, but the king of spades always calls. So actually when we arrive on this king of spades river, it makes us set a very clear value shove, because like the BB range just doesn't have these flushes that much. It's like it's supposed to be 12.8% of the range, and then most of the range is just top pair or 2-pair. So it's just like, and then you're gonna bluff catch like these hands quite often. So like you know, it's actually a very advanced shove in my opinion. I mean, some people will be like, oh, I find that shove easily, which is fair. If you do that, that's good for you. But from my perspective, it's really like understanding that the queen high flush draw is very supposed to fold a lot, maybe versus the pool or versus a recreational player. They just auto call a hand like Jack 7 of spades and you're punting. But okay, so we've skipped a few hands where we just had easy folds, but in these spots, this one good one. We finally get the Broadway plus the flush close turn, and we can talk about our bluff catching strategy here. So in these boards, we're going to be looking at 2 pair plus. Is like it's always going to be a call. Pair plus flush draw, obviously. 4th pair plus under pair plus flush draw. We have some notes on there, which I seem to have forgotten to fill in, but we can. It's the same. It's going to be the same note basically. It's going to be the same note as before. We're talking about that. Having these like pairs with the draw, so like 3s with a spade, 5s with a spade. Obviously they're combo draws, but even just something like 8s with a spade. Now, most people just call them anyway because people know how to play those hands. But we have this incentive. Button will have all these low offsuit hands with a spade. They'll have random things like ace of spades, 10 offsuit. They might even do it with hands like ace of spades, 8. So all of these pocket pairs with a spade suddenly become great hands to call down on this board as bluff catchers because of that amount of bluffing people do with like ace of spades. But no, we've talked about that. But now we're going to have to consider something else, which is here. Now it says here raise with nut flush draw sometimes. So obviously we can defend the flop with things like ace 10 off with the ace of spades. Now, because the pool mostly likes to bluff with the ace of spades, that becomes maybe less good in like a bet check line. But like sometimes you can actually bluff catch a hand like ace jack off with the ace of spades. You actually win a lot in the bet check line with that hand because they give up. They might give up like, you know, they might pussy out with like I don't know, 8-7 of diamonds or something on the river. So you actually get to win with those hands sometimes. But yeah, like raising that Saulo hand is like going to be quite good in like pressuring the other parts of his range, but you kind of have to accept that you're shoving it on the river a lot, but you're trying to pressure like his 2 pairs, his, you know, these kind of like these kind of hands, these sets to fold, but and also like we like start to make him like fold bluffs that would like are supposed to triple, so that can sometimes do it. And also raising 50% with the nut flush is obviously quite good. I think that's pretty good sometimes because when you don't have the ace of spades, they generally just aren't going to have the bluffs in their range, so, which makes the raising with the nuts much better because what they will have are sets and hands that can call the turn. They probably fold the river fairly often sometimes, but like the weaker flushes we do often get to stack too. But you can also just go bet. You can also just check call those hands too, because even though they don't bluff that much, they'll still bet worse hands for value, but you might not, if they don't shove the river, you might not get it all, especially the board pairs. So there's discussions about like whether we do. Obviously, if we look at this hand, we do have, you know, a straight draw but an overcard, but it's not to a nut, so it's a bad draw, it's a bad overcard. We just obviously fold. Yeah. And we will end on this hand. So this is like a typical ace-x board with double flush draw. Yeah, this is a nut flush draw. Now it's not the only nut flush draw. Actually, this one's actually kind of more interesting because it's double flush draw, right? So you got king x of hearts here, it's like a fist pump call. King 10 is like a second nut flush draw, and they are going to do this line with some of their own nut flush draws. Like like ace, they might do it with like a strong ace of spades combo quite often. So calling this becomes like not as automatically good. But I don't see this being a spot where we start to bluff raise with a hand like king ten of spades. I see this more as a spot where we would want to bluff raise like 3x of spades, or like 10-7 of spades, you know, those kind of hands that have like that reinforcement if we do run into the nut flush draw. King 10, I would believe we would want to call this, and there's some EV in calling this, and then, you know, getting to beat him checking down, I don't know, queen 7 of hearts, or even if we like hit a king and, you know, or like if we hit a 10 and they check, like, you know, king, queen 10 or something, I don't know. So yeah, I just think it's like only cool. The paired river is very interesting on the ace that completes the flush. Bear in mind, they're actually not supposed to barrel spades as much. We're also like, but we're kind of incentivized to raise our sets a lot on this spot. We talked about that earlier. We're still gonna sometimes have them, and we're gonna have some two pairs like ace 8. Their value range is going to contain a lot of sets and two pairs, but they're also going to contain a lot of like trips that check back the river, like ace king. So I'm wondering if there are leads in this spot, and if we did lead, we'd probably lead for a very small size. The ace paired, I don't think the ace paired is a great bluff catching spot, so I wouldn't mind like going into like a lead situation, and just go from there. But I'm just curious if it is like something you do. I just get to like experiment on the river. It's a pure punt, in theory anyway. Good to know. We didn't get the opportunity to like stack 6-5 because we're a fish. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting hand to like finish. Yeah. Anyway, that's the end of the video. If you want to talk more, I'm all available in Discord. And yeah, I will catch you guys later.